Happy Sunday, VCers. It's Matt here. Thought I would check in and do a video. My last video was last Sunday, I believe, and I had the Wall of Soul LPs up there. Didn't take them down. I'll probably change them out later this week, put something else up there, some other theme to go with, but right now I think they look good up there, so I'll just leave them be for a little while. Not going to talk about soul music today. I wanted to talk about a new series of reviews I want to do for a band, one of my favorite bands of all time, and that's on the VC. One of my favorite things is when people do album reviews, various and sundry albums. A lot of people do those, always look forward to them. Rockboy 680 does a lot of them. Shannon Lightbreeze does her career overview videos of artists that she likes. Joe, Mean Mr. Mayo, is continuing his series of solo Beatle albums. He's also doing American Beatle album reviews on the dates of their 50th anniversaries, which has been fun to watch. And should be some coming up pretty soon because Hard Day's Night and Something New anniversaries are fast approaching, if I'm not mistaken. But I wanted to do another British band of the same era, one that, in my opinion, has never gotten the respect or attention that they should have and deserve to get, and that would be the Kinks. So anyway, this is their first album, their first American album, so we'll start with that. A little background first. The Kinks started roughly 1962. Peter Quaife, the bass player, got a band together, invited his buddy Dave Davies, guitar player, into the band. Dave brought his brother Ray Davies on board. They went through several different names. They were called the Boll Weevils, they were called the Ravens, they became the Kinks late 63, early 64, depending on whose version of the history you listen to or believe. Roughly they became the Kinks when they got signed to a record label. They brought Mick Avery on board to play drums. Mick had played for a short time in the Rolling Stones when that band was still getting their act together and still playing clubs and all that before they were signed to record labels or known. So that was the classic lineup of the Kinks from 63, 64 through 69. 69, Peter Quaife would leave the band. He sadly passed away in 2010, so he is gone now. So, and Avery would remain long into the band's career. He would stay with them till 1984. Ray and Dave, of course, stayed the whole time until the band broke up in 96. In between 69 and 96, the band had numerous lineup changes, but we'll get into that stuff as we get into further albums down the road. So, anyway, the Kinks' first single, Long Tall Sally, first time I heard it, took a little getting used to. It's kind of a strange version, kind of a bouncy, lightweight version, certainly much tamer than Little Richard's version, not as good as his version, not as good as the Beatles' cover of the same song, but it's a good song. It's not the most powerful debut by any group by any means. Not a bad song. It did absolutely nothing in England, certainly nothing in America. So they followed that up with another 45, You Still Want Me, which was an original song by by Ray Davies. I really like that song. It's not a great song, it's not an epic song, but it's a good song. It's very Beatley sounding, pleasant, kind of a lightweight throwaway song. Nice little melody and harmony, but yeah, it's a nice song. Did absolutely nothing also. Their record label, which was Pye in England, Pye, said, you know, you guys got to get something going or we're going to drop you real fast. So they were under pressure to come up with something. They not only came up with something, they came up with, in my opinion, one of the greatest pieces of music in the history of history. One of the greatest songs ever, in my opinion. You Really Got Me. Hit #1 in England, hit #6 in the USA, was released in August of 1964. Just, you know, you hear songs that you love. Some songs you hear and you like them for a while, and then you hear them so much you get sick of them, you never really need to hear them again. Then there's songs that are just friends for life. I don't know how many thousands, hundreds, millions, whatever times I've heard this song. Every time it comes on the car radio, every time I hear it, those opening power chords, it just puts a smile in my face and lifts my soul and fills me with joy. And I just love this song to death. Always have, probably will for the rest of my life. I was looking, interestingly enough, I guess it's not that interesting, but I was looking at Amazon reviews of this album this morning, and somebody wrote on one of their reviews, it's been accused of being the embryo to heavy metal, punk, and all kinds of upheaval. Couldn't say it better myself. There's an album called The Kinks Chronicles from 1972, which is a double album career overview, greatest hits type album. The liner notes in there, I can't remember the guy's name, but anyway, he writes of hearing that song for the first time in 1964. He was a high school kid, and saying that it felt like driving your car 100 miles an hour into a brick wall in a good way. And I get that. And it's just, the funny thing is, I mean, the Beatles were bigger than everybody, but other than the Beatles, the Kinks were, for this short period of time, way more popular and bigger than the Rolling Stones in America, which is kind of funny. And I guess the Animals probably were too when you think about it. It didn't last long, but and so here, and you think about 1964, this would have been, I'm trying to think of something else that would come close, but this would have been the loudest, heaviest, hardest, rocking, hitting, craziest, pile driving piece of music ever unleashed on the public at that time. It's certainly heavier than anything the Rolling Stones had done to that point. And don't get me wrong, I love the Rolling Stones. I'm not ragging on them, but they had nothing to compare with this, certainly by that time. Um, so I can't really think of much that would compare to this in 1964. Can't Buy Me Love by the Beatles, maybe kind of close. You know, Wipe Out by the Safaris or something. I'm not sure when that came out. But anyway, so, and this is also, in my opinion, the Kinks are also, Beatles aside, this is the second greatest band ever. My second favorite band. They're better than, well, anybody else other than the Beatles, in my opinion. I don't know if most people go that far. That's fine. But the important thing is, most everyone knows that You Really Got Me and Lola. But past that, a lot of people don't really know the Kinks. If you're a 60s fan, if you love the Beatles, if you love the Yardbirds, the Who, the Rolling Stones, the whatever, and you don't really know the Kinks other than a couple of their hits, you're really missing out on some of the greatest music ever made, in my opinion. So, without further ado, let us get to the album. Okay, this is the American version. You Really Got Me came out August 64 was when the song You Really Got Me came out. The album came out in October 64. So there's the American version. Dave Davies was 17 at the time. The other three members were 20. Here's the English version. I don't have it on vinyl, unfortunately. It's just called Kinks instead of You Really Got Me. And this is the deluxe edition of the Kinks albums from the first one up through Muswell Hillbillies in 1972. These came out about 3 years ago. You get they're all 2-disc sets. You get the original album remastered in mono, the original album remastered in stereo. Then you get singles that weren't on the albums released around the same time. You get demos, alternate takes, and unreleased, and various and other goodies. This actually has, how many songs on this thing? Like, between these two discs, there's about 60 songs, which is pretty incredible because this album has I think 14 songs. Now, the other thing got to mention is just like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all the other bands in the 60s, the American record label would take songs off the British release, withhold them so that they could make extra albums. And so the American Kinks albums don't match up, just like the American and British Beatle and Rolling Stones albums don't match up until about 66, 67. So where the English market would have 3 albums, the American market would have 5 or 6 because they would withhold some songs. This album is this album minus 3 songs, basically. So let's put it into a little bit of perspective. Said this first Kinks album came out in October of 1964, went to number 4 in England, went to number 29 in America. By contrast, the Rolling Stones' first album, which in England I think it was just called Rolling Stones, it was called Introducing America's Newest Hitmakers, the Rolling Stones in America. Maybe I've got that wrong. I think that's right. Anyway, the Rolling Stones debut came out April in England, April of 64 in England, May 64 in America. It went to number 1 in England for 12 weeks. Didn't do much in America. It took them a couple albums to get up and going in America. Beatles' first album, Please Please Me, came out in March of 63, so a year before either the Stones or the Kinks' first album. It was number 1 for 6 months in England. Didn't do anything in America because they weren't known in America till 64. But the Beatles album, well, these early albums by all these bands, Yardbirds, Beatles, Kinks, Who, etc., 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 were heavy with cover versions, which was just sort of the norm back then. Please Please Me has 8 original songs out of 14, so 8 Lennon and McCartney songs out of 14. Rolling Stones album, and I forgot to count how many songs are on the debut, but they have 1 original song called Tell Me by Jagger and Richards. Pretty good song. Not their greatest, but I've always liked that song quite a bit. And they have a couple of songs credited to Nanker Felge. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, never was, which is just a pseudonym for the Rolling Stones, a song they kind of wrote, the whole band wrote, I guess, till Mick and Keith got greedy and cornered the songwriting market, I guess. And one of those is Can I Get a Witness, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe that's a cover, but that's a good song. But the other one is, I believe, just an instrumental, and it's nothing much to it. The Kinks album, the American one, has 4 originals out of 12 tracks. So 4 originals. Anyway, the Beatles and the Rolling Stones were better at doing cover versions than the Kinks. The Kinks aren't bad at it. Their covers, mainly these are just old R&B songs, much like the Rolling Stones. Some Chuck Berry and stuff, some Bo Diddley, etc., etc. Kinks don't do a bad job. Their cover versions aren't generic by any means. Some of them are pretty good. Most of them sort of there. Nothing terribly exciting. So side 1 of the American version starts with a song Beautiful Delilah. It's a Chuck Berry song. Dave sings lead. It's kind of a nice little opening, rave up. Nothing epic, but not a bad song. And actually, I had not listened to this album. I've had this album since the 80s. This is an original so far as I know. I don't know if it's stereo or mono. I haven't been able to find anything on the cover of the label to indicate. But I've had this album since around 80, 81, and I do believe it's an original. I haven't listened to it in a long, long time. I pulled it out and I've been listening to it the last couple of days just to familiarize myself with it for the review. And I found myself walking around singing Beautiful Delilah in my head, so maybe it's a better song than I'm giving it credit for. But yeah, it's a Chuck Berry cover, Dave singing, not a bad song. And that's what I'm saying. The Kinks being, in my opinion, the second greatest band of all time, it's kind of hard to sell it on the strength of their debut, which is pretty inauspicious. This aside. So next song we get is So Mystifying. That is a Ray Davies original. Probably going to do that through the whole review. Pretty good song. his next song, Just Can't Go to Sleep, is another Ray original, which is even better than So Mystifying, and it's the third best song on this album. Sort of getting into that Kinks sound, because a lot of this is just sort of sounding like very early Yardbirds before For Your Love, when Eric Clapton was still in the band, or very early Stones. Not as good at doing the covers of the R&B as the Stones were, but uh, just sort of a British band doing R&B covers. And so with Just Can't Go to Sleep, they kind of start to get into that Kinks sound, which they would be famous for. I will say about this album is, even though I said this is a bit of an inauspicious debut, they would get real better real fast. So, but we'll get to that with the subsequent albums down the road. So, Just Can't Go to Sleep, really good song. The where did we go next? Long Tall Shorty is another one of those. I've got some notes here. There's another R&B cover. It's okay. Then you got You Really Got Me, which stands out like Mount Olympus on this album compared to Little Pebbles around it. I mean, it's by far the best thing on this album, and just an incredible, great, one of the greatest songs ever, in my opinion. And the Kinks had several greatest songs ever, in my opinion, but we'll get to those down the road. So, You Really Got Me. Side 2 opens with Cadillac, which is a Bo Diddley song, and it's got the Bo Diddley shuffle beat. It's a good cover. It's a fun song. It's as far as their R&B covers on the album, that's one of my favorites of theirs. Bald-Headed Woman, another R&B cover, is okay. It has got a nice little slow build up to sort of a middle eight. Everything breaks loose a little bit. That's kind of fun, but it's by and large just a nice little R&B cover. Too Much Monkey Business, another cover, Chuck Berry this time. That is, it's okay. I've Been Driving on Bald Mountain is something. Who wrote that thing? Shel Talmy, Talmy. I don't know how you say his name, but that's their producer. So you've got, and I think Talmy was from America, and he went to England and became a producer. If I recall correctly, he also produced some of the early Who stuff, but he wrote that, and it sounds like an R&B cover. It's okay. Stop Your Sobbin', the other Ray Davies original song on here, second best song on the album. Very nice, poignant ballad type song. Chrissie Hynde, the Pretenders, would do a cover version of this years later in 1979 for their debut album. Kinks is better than the Pretenders, and the Pretenders is a really good version, so that's a great song. Slim Harpo's Got Love If You Want It, which just about every English band back in those days did, is here, and their cover of it is really no better or worse than them or the Rolling Stones or the Yardbirds or everybody else that did the song. So it's nice enough, but no great shakes. Again, the three songs that are left off the American version that are on the British version, I Took My Baby Home is a Ray Davies original, which is kind of cool, kind of animal sounding. I'm a Lover Not a Fighter is another R&B cover song. It's okay. Revenge is a song credited to Ray Davies and Larry Page. Larry Page was an early manager of the band. It sounds like a later Kinks song, and I wrote that down, and now I can't remember what it was. I thought I wrote it down, but anyway, it's an instrumental with just some backing, yelling and shouting vocals. There's nothing big deal about that. That's just okay. So 4 of the 11 songs are originals, like I said. The British, the CD contains quite a bit of extra material, like I said, and I'm not going to go through everything because there's 58, 60 songs, but the shame about it is, on the bonus tracks, some of this stuff is really good, and some of this was recorded before the album came out in October, and it's a shame that they didn't include some of these songs, because it would have made the album a lot stronger if they would have included some of these songs and left some of the R&B and the other cover versions in the can. I believe You is a Ray and Dave, credited to Ray and Dave. It's kind of a rarity. It's a very Mercy Beat sort of sounding song, sort of a Chad and Jeremy-ish, uh, Jerry and the Pacemakers type of song. It's kind of funny. I Don't Need You Anymore is another Ray song, kind of Mercy Beat sounding again. Everybody's Gonna Be Happy. There's an early demo version of this. That's a great song that would show up on a later Kinks album. This is just an early version of it. You Do Something to Me is again very, to me, Peter and Gordon, Chad and Jeremy. Doesn't sound like the Kinks, but it's a nice song. There's a song, It's All Right, which was the B-side of You Really Got Me 45, which it starts off promising because it sounds like like it's going into a surf song, instrumental surf song for a couple of seconds, and then it goes back into the conventional R&B cover song. It's an original, I believe that's an original that Ray Davies wrote. It's okay, nothing great. I Gotta Move is kind of R&B sounding, but also some early signs of what the Kinks would become. Don't Ever Let Me Go is a really good song. It's a kind of a slowed down You Really Got Me. Basically, it's You Really Got Me slowed down, sort of, and changed a little bit. But it's got that riff, not as pronounced as in You Really Got Me, and got driving drums, and it's a great song, and it should have been on the album. So, because it was recorded in September '64, so it could have been. And you get an unreleased song, I Don't Need You Anymore by Ray, which is just a fun shout up, a pounding, good vocal interplay between him and Dave, I suppose, maybe Pete Quaife. That was recorded January '64. They should have put that on the album. Would have been strengthened the album. So you get their debut. I would put the Beatles debut number 1, the Rolling Stones debut number 2, and the Kinks number 3. Even though Tell Me by the Rolling Stones, the 3, what's it, the 4, Ray Davies originals on here beat Tell Me by miles. It's kind of a strange beginning. This isn't one of their albums that I pull out all that often, even though it is a good, fun album. By 1964 standards, it's probably a pretty damn good album. They got better really quick, but this is the beginning of the Kinks. And any album that has You Really Got Me on it, Stop Your Sobbing, and what was the other one? Not So Mystifying. That's just okay, but anyway, and those bonus tracks. Good album. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give it a 7. They would get better, real better, a whole lot better, really quick, and so to be continued.